Back on the Young Turks, I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, J.R. Jackson producing, Jesus Godoy directing. Ready for a kick-ass hour here. The first guest we have for you guys, I don't know, we got some sort of controversy going on here. Zeeshan Aleem is an award-winning essayist and journalist based in D.C., and he's written the column, Is 30 Rock Racist? Fascinating. Zeeshan, welcome to the program. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. All right, so lay out your case for me first. How is 30 Rock's obviously on NBC with Alec Baldwin, Tina Fey, etc.? How is it racist?
Well, I guess first I just want to preface my statements by saying that I find 30 Rock to often be a hilarious show, and that I would never suggest that there's anything wrong with watching it. If I didn't enjoy it as much as I do, I probably would have taken notes on every single episode of it. But the thesis of my essay for the Huffington Post was that the character on this show, known as Tracy Jordan, serves as sort of an unsightly collection of every negative trope about African Americans conceived of in the past 2 centuries in the history of the U.S. And that even though the writers of the show employ these pejorative cliches lightheartedly or ironically, that the show's racial humor hews too closely to the racist tradition of minstrelsy, that its imagery backfires, ultimately confirms racist narratives rather than challenges them, and thus I would consider them to be socially irresponsible. I guess it's worth mentioning for the listeners who don't know, in 30 Rock, Tracy Jordan is the lead actor on this fictional live sketch comedy series depicted as airing on NBC, loosely inspired by Tina Fey's experience as a writer on SNL. And Tracy is the star of the show, but he's also a massive burden on its production. And as the dominant black character of the show, he is invariably depicted as sort of hypersexual, mentally challenged, violent, emotionally unstable, sort of man-child. And in a sense, he's textbook because he serves as an exhaustive catalog, an educational catalog of the feared and loathed qualities of quote-unquote blackness accumulated over the course of American history. And while I think the show is rife with characters who exhibit stereotypical elements, the other exaggerated identities of the show cannot draw from a history quite comparable to the canonized derision of African Americans. And the last thing I'd say, this is the thing. Despite the air of provocation the piece has assumed, the thought process behind my argument is fairly ordinary. To say that certain matters are so mired in tragedy that they cannot be buoyed up by humor is distinctly, uncontroversial. As a convenient example of this is genocide. How often does the Holocaust of an ethnic group get thrown into the comic fray? It's hard to think of a manner in which 30 Rock could tastefully start referencing anti-Semitic discourses derived from Nazi propaganda or the protocols of the Elders of Zion, whether ironically or not. And, another example is a New York Post cartoon in which a cartoonist was eviscerated for drawing a cartoon that could have been interpreted as representing President Obama as a monkey. And it's clear that the cartoonist's intentions, became irrelevant because some things are just too hot to touch. So it must be understood that certain images are routinely buried by society because there's little that can be done to make them funny without them being deeply degrading. That's my argument.
All right, I got you, Zeeshan. But look, obviously, we're going to have a conversation here about how it's comedy, right? And so what are the parameters of comedy? So, for example, his co-star, Jenna, on the show, is also neurotic, an idiot, detached from reality, an egomaniac. Now, do you think that that's what Tina Fey, as the writer of the show, is saying about all women?
No, I don't think that. And first of all, I might mention that I'm totally open to and interested in a gender analysis of the story and a class-based analysis of the show. I just chose to pick race because this sort of stood out to me. It's a fairly stark example of irony ultimately failing. But what needs to be said is that not all histories of identity are the same, and thus not all stereotypes are created equal. It's true that Liz, Jenna, Kenneth, Jack, others represent a myriad of popular stereotypes, but the history and iconography that they draw from generally isn't comparable to that of, as I mentioned, the sort of derision of African Americans. The minstrel
Zeeshan,
show.
I hear you. No, I hear you.
Are you aware of the history of the minstrel show?
Yeah, I'm perfectly aware of it. Right. But then the question becomes, well, wait a minute. If we can make fun of women and we can make fun of Kenneth the intern for being a white hick, are you saying that blacks are off limit, that we can't make fun of them because of the history of minstrel shows?
No, I don't think that it is sort of meant to be interpreted as a ban on jokes regarding African Americans, but rather that, yes, one does have to be, one is always mired in history, and that there is a sense of responsibility that when people make these sorts of jokes, as I mentioned, people wouldn't probably accept the idea of Tracy Jordan walking around as a monkey as they didn't accept that cartoon in the New York Post. I mean, that's an example of a joke being off limits, even if it was done ironically.
Yes, but he doesn't walk around as a monkey. I mean,
no, he doesn't, and that's a good thing.
No, okay, well, at least that's a good thing. So, but Zeeshan, how do you want them to do it? That's the problem. It's comedy, right? I mean, you exaggerate things, you make fun of things, you take stereotypes and you blow them up for comedic effect. I mean, how do you do Kenneth without making fun of his white hick? I mean, that's the whole point of the Kenneth joke, is that he's a white hick. So, and how do you know, and part of the joke with Tracy, I never actually thought it was that he was black, is that he was a spoiled, ridiculous, out-of-touch star, which a lot of them are. You could put Lindsay Lohan in there instead of Tracy Morgan, and you probably have the same thing.
I would agree that that's certainly a component of his character, that it is he's a sort of spoiled Hollywood superstar. I would not entirely agree that you get the same thing with Lindsay Lohan. I mean, it's, as many people have pointed out, I mean, it's meant to play on stereotypes of identity. So it wouldn't be funny if Lindsay Lohan was doing all the same things as what Tracy Jordan represents in that show. So
okay, but you know what? And let me go to that too. I know I'm cutting you off a little bit there, but as you acknowledge in your piece, Tracy Jordan in a lot of ways is based on Tracy Morgan, the real comedian who obviously plays him on the show. So is Tracy Morgan not allowed to do his own act because it might seem minstrelly?
Yeah, so this is a fascinating and complex challenge to the argument that I'm making. And first, let me say that I think that the primary point of the piece is just to sort of is witnessing and analyzing a cultural phenomenon, and the whole notion of who's to blame is, I would say, secondary in the scheme of just sort of examining this dynamic and seeing whether or not it's healthy for society. That being said, if you want to talk about, sort of who is responsible for this, there's a number of layers to it. One is that Tina Fey has chosen, Tracy Jordan / if you want to say also Tracy Morgan, to be her dominant black character, and she's also chosen to have him have a certain dynamic with the rest of a predominantly white cast. But if you want to talk about Tracy Jordan, I must admit, I'm not well versed in his work. I do know some of his prior comedic work, and if it draws from that. But is it possible that he is socially irresponsible? Yeah, 100%. I think that is definitely a serious possibility. For example, I'm sure many of the listeners know Dave Chappelle, who is just a massive comedian. And one thing he did in one of his episodes was he had these comedy sketches where there were these sorts of these pixies, and they kind of represented sort of minstrel figures, one for a number of races. And Dave Chappelle actually was quoted in an interview later saying that he felt that there was something off about that experience. He said it was the first time he felt uncomfortable because he realized that members of the staff were, for the first time, not laughing with him, but actually laughing at him. And he actually deemed that sketch socially irresponsible. So, I mean, everyone has some sort of responsibility, and can someone do something that's socially damaging? Absolutely. No.
So, but then here's and Zeeshan, and we're talking to Zeeshan Aleem. He wrote "Is 30 Rock Racist" on Huffington Post. The reason we're having this conversation is because I think it is an interesting topic, and I see some of your points. I do. So I'm partly playing devil's advocate with you, but partly being very serious about challenging you, because part of what I'm worried about is, look, if we break down comedy this much, what's left? I mean, everything can be offensive. I mean, look at Tommy Boy, right? So, fat man in a little suit. Well, no, you can't make fun of fat guys. That's off bounds, and it's insensitive, and we made fun of fat guys for the last 200 years. I mean, you become so reductionist that all of a sudden there's no comedy left.
Well, again, I urge you to consider one of the first points I made, which is that the thought process behind what I'm saying is not particularly sort of daring or provocative, which is that society generally does come to consensus on some issues as being off limits. Like I said, for instance, people don't try to satirize genocide. There's a reason that we don't have popular comedic sketches in which white people are sort of using the N-word satirically towards black people, because ultimately that would be considered distasteful. And again, hewing too closely to something that's a rather ugly tradition. But I can give you some examples. I do not think that race is something that shouldn't be addressed through comedy. It's very, very important to. But all I'm suggesting is that there's sort of more responsible and more irresponsible ways of doing it, and ones that are more forward-looking, and one that can oftentimes, unfortunately, serve to confirm stereotypes. But to give you an example, even in 30 Rock itself, Tina Fey, has this one line where she says she's sort of claiming, or I guess Liz Lemon is claiming who happens to be white, says she's not racist, and providing an example of racism, she says, "Well, remember that time I asked that black guy about Sideways?" And it's supposed to be a funny line because obviously the joke is on her. The whole point is that it's sort of, by bringing to light her own racism, the crux of the joke is the racist. It's not, the traditional victim of racism is not the butt of the joke there. Or another example, popular example is, on South Park, Cartman, who is obviously hilarious, or most people find him very, very funny, is hideously anti-Semitic. But at the same time, it's very clear that the narrative that he espouses have nothing to do with the character whom he directs us all at. So Kyle, who happens to be the main Jewish character in the show, does not conform to any sort of anti-Semitic tropes, and he's actually the moral center of the group. And so the joke again is that Cartman's sort of allegations have no bearing on reality, and so again the joke is on him.
I got you.
Those are examples
look,
of responsible use of
I got you.
talking about racism.
I got you. And you know what? You really have valid points. I understand what you're saying, and partly what you're saying is context matters and who's the butt of the joke, etc. Right? Although
Right.
Another part of me thinks you sound a little like my wife. When if I make a joke about her, she's like, "That's not funny." When you make a joke about yourself, that's funny. Make a joke about me, not funny. Right? Okay. Now, but having said that, so final question on the context. Look, if Rush Limbaugh is making a joke, and in the past he's said definitively racist things, we talked about on the show yesterday, right? It's not that funny because you don't think he's really kidding, right? You get a sense that he actually means it. Does it matter who's making the joke? So whether it's Tina Fey, who has obviously worked with African Americans her whole life, and et cetera, and we have no reason to believe is racist, does it matter if it's Tracy Morgan, who himself is black, et cetera, or does that not matter at all?
Mm-hmm. No, well, I can't speak to Rush Limbaugh at all, but I can say yes. The person who is uttering those sorts of comments is certainly critical to it. I mean, context always matters, and obviously, some people, when they say something racist, they mean it. Again, it can be used satirically. I just think that in some cases that it fails. But yeah, of course, I think that in a number of settings one can. Again, I don't think that there's. I'm suggesting that there's some sort of ban on all these jokes, but rather that. We just be careful about the sort of legacies that we, end up reviving in some forms of comedy.
All right. Certainly an interesting piece. It's called "Is 30 Rock Racist?" It's on Huffington Post. It's from Zeeshan Aleem. Zeeshan, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks very much for having me on the show.
No problem. All right, we'll be right back. Young Turks.